I got a report from Thorold. Walsh has been bad-mouthing me on the ships. I want you and Casper to do a job on him.
Don't know if I recognize Walsh if I saw him.
Well, caution knows him. Take caution with you. And stay away from the union halls. I don't want either of you seen in the area.
When we done the job?
You come right back here.
Okay, Mr. Banks.
Casper's big enough to kill a guy.
You're an expert.
Well, I said I went over, and which is true. I went to see Captain Delorier, who was a confrere of Captain Walsh's, and I said to him, get a hold of Walsh and tell Walsh to watch himself. He may be in trouble.
But Hal Banks' empire had started to show some cracks. Michael Sheehan could no longer stomach his old boss.
I'd finally broken off with Banks, and we'd started the Canadian Maritime Union to fight him on the Great Lakes.
That's him.
They missed my head by a couple of inches. I chased the car when I saw it couldn't get up speed. I wanted to get the license number. But they were real pros, though. Plates bent down.
You can make a mistake, and when you get down the road, you find that you can't get out. Or at least you can't get out and stay healthy. And that was what eventually happened. That any severance, unless he wanted to completely dominate, and you would end up carrying out all kinds of gangster activities yourself, because that would be that was the route that he was taking. So you have to back up and get out. And when you do it at great risk, let me say.
Dick Greaves had decided to take his chances. He had been double-crossed. Banks had made a move to take over Greaves's union. On the East Coast, the Marine Engineers had been raided by Banks. Greaves headed for Vancouver to defend his western flank and to seek out allies for a counterattack.
And was doing some work in the afternoon, and there was a knock at the door. They said, we came to give you something, and they caught me in the temple.
If somebody's coming after you, always put your back to the wall? Is that what you do? Try to land on your back?
Right, land on your back, because, you know, if they kick you, that was my reaction to it. If they're going to kick your kidneys in, in the back, higher up, if they're going to kick you in the ribs, well, that's one thing. It's sort of hollow and bouncy. But if they get a good, real solid kick into your kidneys, it'll dislodge the damn things from inside, and you probably have real trouble all the rest of your life.
Hal Banks was on dangerous ground. He was turning on his allies. He had embarked in a campaign to control every man on every Canadian ship afloat, and he was pushing his luck.
Fast! Go bad, Roy.
There was a gathering of forces rising up against him. In the forefront of this battle was Elroy Robson, Vice President of the powerful Canadian Brotherhood of Railway, Transport, and General Workers. Robson's CBRT had long represented seamen on East Coast ferry boats, and Banks was now raiding his membership.
You're going to have to do something.
Both Robson's CBRT and Banks's SIU were members of Claude Jodoin's Canadian Labour Congress, and Jodoin was trying to referee.
Listen, you guys are going to have to iron this out, okay? Because there's nothing more that I can say to persuade you.
Mr. Banks, if you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone as we have in the past. And everything will be all right.
Look, I don't give a goddamn how long these fellas have been in your Gandhi Dancers Union. I represent seamen, and I will not rest until every seaman in this country is a member of the SIU.
Hal, don't misunderstand our mild manners. You have 12,000 members, all of them seamen. In a fight with us, you're outnumbered 3-to-1 in resources. If you win, you get 1,200. If we win, we get 12,000. I like that arithmetic.
You know what, Roy? I hope that you were just making a point, huh? About going after his members.
What point are you making?
You're not going to get any support for any raid on the SIU.
Even if they raid us?
Oh, come on, Elroy. Do I have to spell it out for you? 80% of our unions are members of the AFL-CIO. The SIU is a member. In a fight with the SIU, it would be very difficult for me to side with you in a jurisdictional battle.
Because we're a Canadian union?
Oh, come on. I'm as Canadian as you are.
Look, I know you're asking me to help yourself out of a problem.
And yourself.
All right. Then you'd better learn how to control your Mr. Hal Banks. Because if you can't, you and your international unions will have a mess on your hands. And the Canadian public won't understand why steel workers and auto workers are working to keep that son of a bitch in office.
Hey, doesn't it ever cool down here in Washington?
I appreciate you coming down here, Claude. But as far as I'm concerned...
Within a year, Claude Jodoin was in Washington bearing unpleasant news. Elroy Robson had gathered enough votes to expel Banks and his union from the Canadian Labour Congress.
I've talked to Robson. He's not going to budge either.
Those Gandhi Dancers.
They're a Canadian union.
If you're planning to give them our jurisdiction, let me tell you something. We won't either load or unload any cargo in the USA, and you got my word.
Jodoin himself finally realized he had no option but to join the forces against Banks.
Oh, come on. Times have changed, huh?
So have you. Banks was telling me that you called the SIU a hoodlum empire in one of your speeches.
That's right. I did.
So, don't come and ask me for any favors.
The Seafarers International Union, the SIU, led by the controversial Hal Banks, was expelled today by the Canadian Labour Congress. The move to oust Banks and his union was led by CBRT President Elroy Robson. It's expected there will be repercussions in the U.S. The CBRT is one of the few Canadian unions which has no American affiliation. Hal Banks's SIU, on the other hand, has its head office in the U.S. and remains a member of George Meany's AFL-CIO.
So, are you still in business?
So, what's the matter with your fucking country? You invite me up here, I do your dirty work, I clean out the commies, and then you crap all over me. You're a smart boy. Why aren't you down in the States?
Any work in New York? I'm good at my job.
No, you just stick with me for a while. Nobody's running me out of this country. We are still in business, my friends. Look at that. Look, this one loves this one.
But now Banks faced revolt on another front. The Upper Lake Shipping Company, which Banks had brought to its knees 10 years earlier, had decided to stand up and fight.
Okay, we're breaking with the SIU. Mr. Leach is solid on that. Got it?
There was such bad feeling that I had concluded at any rate that Banks would take such steps to punish us. It would be almost the point of driving us out of business, because he couldn't let shipping companies do that. Therefore, having taken that step, it was very, very difficult to turn back. It's not the type of step that I might take now. Well, I'd like to think I would, but I'm not sure I would. It was too risky. It was very risky. It was unbusinesslike.
Jack Leach's act of defiance would cost him $2 million. He had replaced Banks' SIU with crews from Sheehan's Canadian Maritime Union, backed by Robson's Canadian Brotherhood. Once again, American longshoremen refused to offload his cargo. Once again, his men were afraid to leave their ship. One June day in Toledo, Ohio, Captain John Bissett decided to go ashore. He belonged to no union. He felt he had nothing to fear. He'd brought his wife along on the trip, and she had wanted to go shopping.
Which cabby did the pickup for Captain Bissett?
Car 7, John.
Your destination 7?
LaSalle Department Store.
Did you attempt to discuss this at any time with government officials?
Certainly, the support of the government by something that I thought was fundamentally evil at that time bothered me a great deal. They seemed to wash their hands of it, even though they had to know of Banks' record and they had to know what he was doing. It really concerned me that that could happen in our country.
Elroy, I received a wire from the Minister of Labor, and he says it's out of his hands. It's under provincial jurisdiction.
Typical Canadian bullshit.
Elroy Robson was also getting no government help in protecting his men.
Does he acknowledge?
John Diefenbaker had swept Banks' old liberal pals from office, but it didn't seem to make any difference.
So you're not going to get help from the Canadian government, the American government, or the AFL-CIO?
I've wired Diefenbaker. In the wire, I said, if you can't protect government employees, I will. Include. I bloody well will.
Elroy Robson had found his battleground. The St. Lawrence Seaway had opened 3 years earlier, a gigantic engineering feat, the pride and joy of the Canadian and the U.S. governments. If one lock were closed, the Seaway would be paralyzed, and there would be a continental crisis. Robson had the weapon to force that crisis. He had organized the lockmasters on the Welland Canal, and he was urging them to take the final fateful step.
Most of you guys have probably voted conservative. But John Diefenbaker isn't going to protect you. And the American government doesn't give a damn if the SIU comes in with their raiders and tries to take over. So what are we going to do?
Well, look, we'd love to be able to help you, but these are a conservative bunch of guys. They come from conservative communities along the canal. And what, we've only been organized a year now? John McNamara's not sure that if it does come to a strike vote that the motion will carry.
At precisely 11:30 that night, as was his habit, John McNamara left home for his night shift.
Our guys in the Seaway might not have struck, but on the evening of the vote of our members, they beat up our local president, a lockmaster on the canal named McNamara. So you vote. It seems in this country it's okay to spill blood on the waterfront, but you don't do it on a freshly mowed lawn. That touches a nerve.
come from the hospital. John's lucky to be alive. He needed 65 stitches in his face. They used his garden shears. I know some of you men have been leery about engaging in what could be called an illegal strike. I know for some of you that goes against the grain. Anyone who still feels that way should go have a look at John McNamara's face. The motion is already on the floor. That Local 212 of the Canadian Brotherhood of Railway, Transport, and General Workers engage in retaliatory action against the SIU. All in favor? Aye. No more SIU manships through the locks as of 12 noon today.
Within hours, Hal Banks had retaliated. If his ships weren't getting through the locks, no other ships would. His men swung one of their boats across the entrance to the Welland Canal, and the interior of the North American continent was blockaded. The Canadian government went into emergency session.
The Seaway strike has lasted only 36 hours, but has already seriously disrupted shipping into the Great Lakes. This afternoon, the strikers agreed to lift the pickets when the Prime Minister announced that a commission of inquiry will be convened to examine the activities of the Seafarers International Union under Hal C. Banks. The commission will be headed by British Columbia Appeal Court Judge T.G. Norris. Some observers are wondering whether anyone will show up to testify about alleged misdeeds on the waterfront. In several court cases involving the SIU and Mr. Banks, key witnesses have failed to appear.
The guy called yesterday. He found my letter and file.
What do they want from you?
They want me to testify.
Well, how much does it cost to go to Ottawa?
They're gonna pay my way.
Those commissions are all the same. A lot of lawyers make a lot of money and nothing ever changes.
And there's a knock on the door and I get my kneecaps cracked.
Don't go.
I don't know.
My main function was to look after the witnesses, which meant that whatever town they were in, then we had to arrange for rooms for the witnesses. And one of my jobs was to make sure they had a nice white shirt or a clean shirt on and were respectable looking before they went into the courtroom.
Jim Todd.
Jim Todd aboard Goulburn?
Yeah, James Todd.
Jimmy, if you value your kneecaps, you better get on back to Scotland. You won't have no pot of grease to save your ass in this town.
You bastards think I'm going to run and hide now. I'll see you in court.
On August 7th, 1962, the Norris Commission convened in Ottawa.
Big show. Hi. Good? Good, thanks.
Oh, autograph. Mr. Banks, over
This
here.
way, Hal. Could you look over
Over here, Mr. Banks.
Comments.
You speak to this lady. I'll give you all the comments.
There was not only the question of whether any witnesses would show up. There was a question of whether or not this commission of inquiry would be used in the traditional Canadian manner, to cloud the issues and delay the findings until the general public had forgotten what it was all about.
To look as good as they can as well for the court.
Our boys are gonna look better than any of these goons.
I hope so.
Here comes the judge.
everybody rise?
The choice of T.G. Norris as commissioner indicated that this inquiry would be legitimate. The judge had a reputation in British Columbia for dedication and integrity.
Mr. Banks, would you take the stand?
The lawyers who had pressed the case against Banks were skilled, seasoned, and deadly serious. They would have to draw on all their skills. Hal Banks had been in a witness box before,
Tell the truth, the whole truth,
and he'd
and nothing but
beaten
the truth, so
almost every rap.
Mr. Banks, it has been said that you were invited to come to this country by the Canadian government. Could you tell us what those discussions were and where they took place, if you know?
Yes. We had discussions with the Minister of Labor, Mr. Mitchell, and the Minister of Transport, Mr. Chevrier, with regard to these matters.
Well, what does this DNS mean? Does it mean do not ship?
Do not ship, that is right.
Well, supposing it says that I'm a member of the 99-year club, I'd have to be pretty young to get off that list.
The 99-year club is a figure of speech. Just because a person has been recommended for the 99-year club does not mean that he cannot ship for 99 years, Mr. Dublin.
I put it to you that those recommendations have to be submitted to you. Every one of them.
Every one of them.
And if a person is designated as DNS, he is immediately removed from the ship.
That is not true.
If the recommendation was for a man to be DNS'd, once you put your stamp on it, off he goes.
That is not true, and you have no evidence to that effect.
Well, don't tell me what I have. I will put to you what I have.
You could not have, because it did not happen.
We have a form signed by Mr. Sheehan, stamped by yourself, recommended for the DNS list.
Signed by myself?
Your initials, HCB. I have an exhibit stating the following persons to be put on the DNS list.
Well, there could have been a form mix-up, could have been any number of things. These forms are mimeographed in great quantities, Mr. Devon.
Well, do you not think it's fair to say that your members fear being classified as DNS?
If it were true, it would not be a good situation. But there is not one substance of truth in what you have just said, Mr. Devon.
It's not for you to say, Mr. Banks.
It is for me to say, because I know. I am there every day, Mr. Devon.
You have jobs to sell.
That is not true at all.
You run a hiring hall. I can't get a job in this country without going through the hiring hall.
Will a size 40 do you, Bill?
That'll fit.
Jesus, you do all kinds of jobs in this union, but I never thought I'd be running a clothing store. You look like $1 million, Bill.
Those lawyers tough on you?
You just tell your story straight. Now, some of Hal's body boys will be there, flexing their muscles. Pay no attention to them.
Fuck them. What can they do to me they haven't done already, eh?
Would you tell us what happened?
I talked to the port agent, and I asked Preston for more of an explanation on why I was DNS'd. I asked him how much I owed, and he told me it was $32 and something.
And did you offer to pay the arrears of dues?
Yes, I did. I offered to pay that, and I offered to pay double. I offered him $125, $150 cash.
Why did you do that?
Because I was desperate for a job.
Is there any special reason that you were desperate?
Well, my wife, when she was a girl, she was very badly burnt from the crest of the chin to the waist. And every year she...
Just a moment, Mr. Lawrence.
Take your time, witness.
Just take your time. Now, you said that you were desperate for a job. You said that your wife had been in a fire?
Yes, she had. And she has to go in every year for skin grafting. And this particular year, she was in the biggest part of the winter.
And did you explain that to the port agent in Thorold?
Yes, I did, sir. He said, I'm very sorry, but you will have to go to Montreal.
Did he indicate who you were to see in Montreal?
Yes, Hal C. Banks.
And did you go to see Mr. Banks?
No, I didn't. I didn't have the money.
And you said that Mr. Meisner, the owner of the company that you worked for, said that he could not help you.
He said, I'm very sorry, Bill. I know the chief would like to keep you. I was talking to him, but we are in negotiations with the union ourselves, and we are up to our necks, and there is nothing we can do. I can't do anything for you.
Thank you, Mr. Loss. That will be all. Did Mr. Banks ever tell you why he operated this DNS list? What his object was in doing this?
He told me many times at the discussions, and the last time, when I blew my stack with him, was in Switzerland. In Bern, Switzerland. That was in June of 1960.
Yes?
He was in one of his good humors, and he was scheming. He said, we can get rid of 1,000 old members a year, and take another 1,000 at $240 a shot. He said, some of those old-timers are getting too wise.
Billy, take a letter. It's to New York. The Norris Commission is being used by factions of the CLC to do something the CLC couldn't do itself. To destroy the SIU. We are in serious trouble if we are unable to bring out our own side of this, because it is obvious a lot of witnesses are lying like hell at the commission. We had an official who defected, who went off his nut. We had you remember? We had to send him to Frisco for a brain operation. He had a mastoid eating out his brain. He couldn't even get onto a plane without endangering himself. New paragraph. Sheehan got real wild. Had he stayed with the truth, or a half-truth, or a germ of the truth, he could have had us in a pickle. But he is a fink. And like a fink, he took his pants down all the way. End of paragraph.